Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you all for taking time from your schedule to join us today to hear about how the ecosystem in Hong Kong has come together to address the textile microplastics challenge. My name is Rakesh Vazirani. I'm with TÜV Rheinland. And to start it off, I would like to request Mr. Bjorn Lindner, who's with Schwarz Group here in Hong Kong, to lead us forward. Bjorn?
Hello, everyone. Depending on where you're sitting at the moment, a very good morning to you, or good afternoon, or probably even good evening. We do have quite an international audience today, which are all spread over the world, and everything is virtual. Yes, as Rakesh said, I'm working with the Schwarz Group, which is better known for Lidl and Kaufland, but I'm also having the pleasure of being the elected president of the German Chamber of Commerce here in Hong Kong. And we're welcoming you today to this joint effort of Invest Hong Kong, TÜV Rheinland, and the German Chamber of Commerce. The reason why we decided really also as the German Chamber to support this project in meaningful discussion is quite obvious. We as the German business community started already last year with a huge sustainability series, Green Solutions from Germany, because sustainability and protection of our nature is the core of all whatever we are doing. Secondly, what we can see later on, the textile microplastic challenge has a lot to do with sourcing and trading, as we'll learn later on. We, as our German Chamber of Commerce, we do have roughly 1/3 of our members coming from these industries. So we are a big player in this process as well. Yeah, textile microplastic, I think it's very interesting to see what we learn later on, because everybody's talking about what happens with the textile after we use it. When we talk about landfill, we're talking about what's happened in the environment. But I think what's even more important, especially at the beginning, of how do we design the articles and how do we make sure that the production is sustainability as well. This is something we are looking forward to hear later on. And I'll pass back to Rakesh for some for them. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Bjorn. Thank you for those words of encouragement, but also support on behalf of members of the German Chamber. Now, as we start off today's webinar, we will first have a look at textile industry, textile products, and the topic of microplastic. Then let's look at what do we have in the environment out there, what's going on there. Also, what is research institutes, what are they doing in terms of reviewing how design can be better adapted to reduce microplastic shedding? And then after research comes out, of course, it's important to scale this research globally. That's what we will see. And in order for all of that to work together, there's of course a need of an ecosystem, a vibrant ecosystem. And we'll see how Hong Kong presents that ecosystem view out here. Okay, so first of all, we're talking about the fashion industry. This is how it makes us all feel. I'm sure before you stepped out of your homes, you would have looked in the mirror, and many of you would have the smile similar to this young girl out there. It allows us to express ourselves. It allows us to express the feelings that we are having at that moment. But at the same time, there's also another impact, and that is here. This is on a high level how plastics are going through the textile supply chain. So of course it starts off with suppliers, which then produce products. It goes through a finishing step before going into the global trade and ending up with customers, consumers like all of us. And many of us either wash the clothes at our homes or send it out to the laundry. Now, this is where we see the situation when we talk about microplastics. So what you see on a high level is here, synthetic fiber going into the production area. And as you see, at every step at production, there is also shedding. Some of it goes into the wastewater treatment plant. Some of it goes into the air. So of course, there's also a risk to workers there. And then as it goes through the steps of finishing, washing, going to the consumer, we see at every step, because of abrasion, because of interaction with sunlight, UV degradation, and so on, these tiny microplastics are coming out, which go into the environment, which goes into the soil, into the ocean, and we all know that this is the source of food for us. So looking at the big picture, microplastics, of course, can arrive from many different product categories, from tires, from synthetic textiles, from plastic granules, also from all the plastic that unfortunately ends up in landfill, and which again goes through this process of degradation due to sunlight, due to UV interaction, and how all of this makes its way back into the ocean, along with, of course, the big one being fishing nets. But at the moment, we'll be focusing about how textile products and how textile industry can play its part in reducing, understanding, eliminating the challenge. So before we start looking, I think it's also useful to see where many of you are joining from. So thank you, all of you, for taking the time. Hello, salam, namaste, xin chào, guten morgen, bonjour, and merhaba. Thank you all for taking the time. An overwhelming majority, of course, is here from Hong Kong, which is where the sourcing operations of many of the large brands are. And if we look at the next slide now, we see that we have participants representing almost every stakeholder in the supply chain. We have brands, we have testing institutes, we have consultants, tier 1 factories, tier 2 factories, industry associations, NGOs, and investors. So thanks again for this broad and wide interest. Now, when we talk about your product categories, which is what you are purchasing, selling, and which is all of us are consuming, we see that many of you are involved with apparel products, with home textiles, accessories, footwear, raw material, and all of those, of course, are part of our fashion industry or the textile industry. At the same time, we also see the kind of materials that you indicated that are being used. And we see that in addition to natural fiber from animal sources or so on, we also see a wide usage of synthetic materials. Thank you for sharing those insights with us. Now, in terms of what goes on, what we heard from Bjorn, we talk about the finished product, but it's also important to understand and zoom in on what's going on in production, pre-consumer. And one of the steps which results into microplastic coming out of the fabric is this wet processing step of washing, finishing, dyeing. And what we see is an overwhelming majority of your supply chains are also involved in those wet processes. What we also see is the kind of assurance or evaluation mechanisms that are being undertaken. That's at the bottom. So what we see is many of you are utilizing standards like CDHC for evaluating your wastewater, like SAC, HIG FEM for evaluating the processes in your factories. Many of you are also, of course, sending samples of your fabric for testing as per chemical requirements, as per quality physical requirements. And only a small portion of you are putting your fabrics through microfiber shedding. And this is what we will look a little deeper into. Let's look on to the next one. While we are here today in 2021, talking about how textile industry and textile products contributes to the microplastic issue, information about this was already out in 2011. You see here Professor Mark Brown, he's based in Australia. He already had the report. It was only in 2014 that it was widely reported and brands started to engage even further. And this research went on to the next step in Europe, as we see on the next slide. So in general, what these research was focusing on was looking at what happens at fiber production stage, at textile production stage as use phase, but also during recycling and unfortunately landfilling and how it pollutes the soil, the water, our oceans, and so on. So you see the endpoints there, the airborne microfibers, which is of course harmful to us as consumers, but also to the workers. So every company who's looking at social due diligence, environmental due diligence in the supply chain, We'll also have to focus on and evaluate what's the risk to the workers because of airborne microfibers. Let's look on to the next one. This is what's happening, has already taken place in Europe as part of the Mermaid program, where focus was on understanding, evaluating the kind of microplastic which is detected in the ocean and which of that can be traced back to textile fabric and textile products. Let's look on to the next one then. On to the next slide. So in general, on a high level, the Mermaids program is capturing this data and then correlating it with fiber, yarn, fabric, and garment to see what kind of changes in the yarn in terms of, let's say, the twist or the yarn count or the fiber length or the different dyeing processes, and what's the impact of that onto microfiber shedding for the garment. And this is what the Mermaid program focused on. The report is out there and it's publicly available. Let's look on to the next slide. So on a high level, policy is in place. For example, in Europe, there's already focus on microplastic. It's part of the policy infrastructure. At the same time, in California and also in other parts of Europe, there are requirements now whereby washing machine manufacturers needs to install filters to capture the microplastics. There's additional research going on. There are standards being developed and several brands, I'm sure many of you are on the call today, are working together with TMC or Uratex to work together to gather this data in order to make better informed choices for textile design and production process. The TMC program, of course, is looking at the entire life cycle, starting off at raw materials, fiber, yarn, and going all the way through, also including the laundering phase, to see what parameters, what criteria are having an impact on microplastic shedding, and hopefully put that information back in the hands of designers and manufacturers so that they be able to take care of mitigation actions. Now, it's also important that we have to be technically correct in terms of microplastic. There's definition from ECHA, but also from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which mentions that we are talking about microplastics at the moment, which are less than 5 millimeters. Of course, there will be about nanoplastics, picoplastics, picometers in the future, but for now, we focus on microplastics. So in principle, at consumer level, at consumer use phase, there are now standards from the Microfiber Consortium, from AATCC, and also an ISO standard in development, SEN standard because of this joint industry action taking place in Europe, which is at the finished product level. Additionally, let's imagine now how information about microplastic shedding at finished product level, at fabric level, at garment level, can be correlated with microplastic shedding at pre-consumer stage, at production process, depending on the wet processes, depending on the fiber construction, depending on the fiber composition. How all of that data could perhaps tell a story to designers, to manufacturers, that they be able to configure their production processes, their fiber composition in order to eliminate microplastic shedding. So the idea is to combine consumer stage data with pre-consumer stage data. All right. And so, of course, it makes sense to start off looking at what's in our environment. And for that, today, we have two experts from the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. We have Dr. Cindy Lam. She's a lecturer at the Department of Ocean Science. She secured her PhD in Germany. And at the moment, she's working together with secondary students, but also university students in automatizing and fast-tracking the detection of microplastic in the ocean. She also combines AR and VR within her teaching approaches to engage students even more. And we also have Mr. Frank Lam. He's with the Department of Engineering for focusing both on chemical and biological streams. He's also a visiting professor in Israel, so Shalom. And he will share with us how he's combining these this area of microplastic analysis in the environment with the engineering discipline, yeah, with SmartFish. So Cindy and Frank, please take us through what you have accomplished so far and what the plan is.
Okay, thank you, Rakesh, for the kind introductions. And I'm Cindy. So we have Frank here.
Hello.
So we are going to talk about our ideas of our project, which is to develop the real-time detection of microplastics in the oceans. So, and then according to Rakesh previously mentioned about the definition of microplastics, which is less than 5 millimeters. And for the nanoplastics, they are even smaller. So, and then just like when we look outside in the oceans, it looks like is clean, but in fact, because of their small size, they are everywhere. So, and then we understand different size of the ocean plastics. They pose harms to marine animals, particularly mammals, such as if we have a big plastic bags, so they just look like a jellyfish. So, and then the sea turtle will eat them accidentally. So that because plastics it cannot be digested fully, so that they will, in the end, they will die. So in the ocean. So, and then for the smaller ocean plastic, like microplastics, so they also pose different threats to marine ecosystem, such as the zooplankton will accidentally ingest it into their bodies, and then they will accumulate and magnify its toxicity, which is attached on its surface, and then along through the food chain. All right. So, and then we understand microplastics is everywhere, which means that no matter in the food, even in the salt, and in various coastal environment, even in our drinking water, and even in the air as well. So they are everywhere. So what can we do to deal with the problem? So, and then we understand every year about 12.2 million tons of the plastics, so entering into our oceans. And then you can look at the land-based coastal plastics. They are up to 9 million tons, which is if you divided these two values, then you can get around at least 75% of the plastics are entering, so in the end up in the coastal areas. So there is a huge amount of plastics. So, and then we understand these, no matter ocean plastics and then microplastics, they will once entering into the oceans, they may spread. So, and then they are on the surface due to different densities, or some of them they will entering into the water column. So that's why pose different threats to the environment. So, and then we understand these primary microplastics, so is around 0.95 million tons, which is it seems not that much. But if we look carefully about the logos, we found that around 20% of primary microplastics are from these synthetic textiles, so which is pay a significant contribution. So that's why we eager to think of a solution, so that to maybe help to clean the environment, and then maybe work with different stakeholders, and then to do more to protect the ocean. So, and then we also found the traditional way to do the microplastic counting is a bit time consuming, because every time we spend a day or so in the sea or in the ocean with our nets. So, and then to collect all these plastics, and then bring all them back to the laboratory, and then train up our students to do the counting, at least to differentiate these are plastics, those are not. And then we will bring all these plastic items to the laboratory to do the further identification using Raman spectroscopy or the FTIR. It really takes time. And we also understand that there is no standard of the collection, because you can use any nets with different pore size that may generate different answers. So that's why we have an idea to create the smart fish, which is the autonomous device, a machine, so which it can go to the sea anytime, anywhere. So because it is a program device, so that it can collect the microplastics on its own, and then to do the detection anytime and anywhere. So I will pass the time to Frank to maybe introduce more about the idea.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Cindy. So our smart fish actually is the one with the autonomous function. So we aim actually to develop the device actually can do the real-time sampling and also the detection of the microplastic, or even we say is microfiber. Okay, it could be in the coastal area that we want to know about what types of the microplastics, and also how much actually of the microplastics actually in the sea. So that's why what we want to do is to use the kind of like engineering tools. Say we can have like to quantify them, to characterize them, apart from the lab one, because the lab when we do is a kind of like using the very sophisticated equipment like FTIR or even the Raman, but we just make it a very simple detection method, okay, actually to do this. Now, for the smart fish, I think this one actually is a very general, kind of like a flow chart, how actually we can do it. So with the water, if say the water actually contains those of the microplastics, then we can do with the sampling, we can do with the filtration. So finally, because once you have the water actually from the ocean, actually you have the kind of like organisms, those of the aquatic animals, right, with the plastics. So how actually we can differentiate them? Actually, we use the staining method. Then after that, I think you can see actually from the figure here, you can see that some of the colored stuff. Actually, this one actually is the microplastics. And then finally, we do with the imaging, okay, and then we design the app actually with the students. Then what we got is some of the counting. Okay, that actually is the on-site counting. So you don't need actually to bring the samples actually to the lab, and then we can do the analysis actually on-site. That will be much easier and more simple compared to the those of the technique actually before. Now, how about Cindy and me actually have already like some kind of like an idea, and then we actually have one of the video actually talking about our technology. Maybe you enjoy the video. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's no.
So and then the idea comes up when we bring the students to do the beach cleanup. So we found that it is easy to collect some large piece of ocean plastics, but for the smaller ones, we just leave them behind. So we do nothing about that. So that's why it comes up with the idea. So shall we do something to clean up the small pieces? So this is to illustrate the problem if we use the traditional method on the identification of microplastics in the laboratory. So that's why I come up the idea with Frank, and then we work with the students from the science field, and then the engineering students come up together to work on these prototype.
Yeah.
So, and then the idea of the first problem that we have to do the design, so to make it more streamlined, so that the students suggest to use to borrow the concept of the manta ray. So, and then it looks like it can run smoothly in the ocean. So, and then Frank, maybe
I can elaborate a bit,
yes.
Right? So this is the whole unit. I think you can see this from the whole unit. So this is the water actually they can suck into the microplastic unit. Okay. And yep. So this is the prototype, and we actually have tried actually onto the sea. And this one, so what we do is to let the water actually pump in actually into the system, and then we will go through the filtration unit. Now, most of the microplastic actually will stay actually on the filter, okay, and then we do the staining. Now, 2 colorants actually have been used, okay, to differentiate those of the materials, whether this one is the bio materials or even with the microplastic one. So after that, we will use the counting, okay, so this one actually you can see. This is the red one, okay, and then we use the blue one to do the staining, okay. Then after that, yep, and then we take the photo, yeah, and these photo actually will go through the app, and then finally we can get those of the image actually from the phone. Then you can count how many of the microplastics there. Yeah, so you can see we actually can differentiate those of the polypropylene, polystyrene,
and polyethylene.
And polyethylene as well. Yeah. Yep. Thanks. Thank you. So we go back to the.
Yeah.
Sorry, it may take some time for the PowerPoint.
While we load up the PowerPoints, some of the participants might be thinking, where can I order this machine?
You can contact me. I can have my email actually.
Okay.
Yep. So I think this is our future direction, not just only the testing actually in the kind of like in the ocean, but also we can talk about like a different kind of like a water sample, say in the textile industry. So we have lots of the like a wastewater, actually they may contain those of the kind of like a microplastic or even the microfibers. Like me, actually, I'm working on those of the research in the washing machine. Those of the effluents actually from the washing machine, we may know that how much of the microfiber or even the microplastics there. Using these kind of the technology, then we can apply that and also implement in the commercial side. Maybe we can work with GIZ, okay, and also with the company, say like the TUV here. So we can do with these kind of the kind of like a collaboration to make it like a. Because Hong Kong, currently, actually, we still don't have the kind of like a standard to measure those of the microplastics, but we better to have these kind of the collaboration together, and then we can make these world actually better. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Now, having looked at what's out there in the environment, and of course, it now begs the question, okay, but how is it getting there, and how are our clothes responsible for that? What is it about clothes that we should be thinking about? So before we start looking at it, Ryan, can you pull up the first question, the first poll question, please? So it will be useful to get an idea from you when you are purchasing products, either as a consumer or let's say as a brand or retailer from your suppliers, or when you as a designer are talking with your marketing teams about textile articles. What are the aspects that you are thinking about? What are the aspects that you talk about? Price, look and feel, durability, social impact, environmental impact, microplastic shedding. So if you could please select the 3 most frequently used criteria during your discussions, during your planning. And that will be a good headway for Dr. Gloria, who's with HK Rita and focuses on research and also looks at human textile interface, looks at new materials, also looks at scaling research on a high level. Yeah, your institute is of course famous for many of the new innovations. So it will be useful for you also to reflect. Let's see, what do you see there as findings? Can you move it to the center a little bit? Okay, so we see, of course, quality is one aspect that we think about with regards to fabric and garments. We see price, we see look and feel, we see durability, compliance, microfiber shedding. Yeah, well, at least somebody looking at this when thinking of products. So Dr. Gloria, if you could please introduce and share with us in 15 minutes the many years and thousands of hours of work that your team has been doing on this topic.
Thank you. Good afternoon and good morning. It's my great honor to be here, share my talk today, textile and microplastic researchers from Hong Kong RITA. So Hong Kong RITA is a research institute under Hong Kong Innovation and Technology Commissions. We conduct applied research to support the Hong Kong textile industry. So microplastic a paper published in 1974, actually is quite long ago, in the top journal Science, raised the topic, the risk of microplastics in the ocean. Later on, the discovery of microplastic in aquatic organisms has triggered concern about its impact on the ecological system and human safety. Studies have found that microplastics have spread to almost all places on the earth, from the deepest trenches to the highest mountain. Microplastic can be so small that they fly in the high altitude atmosphere as a part of dust. Huge amount of microplastic observed in the marine environment expose human beings into risk of food security and availability. It was reported 93% of bottled water and 90% of table salt contains microplastic. A study predicts that the amount of microplastic tends to keep increase dynamically in future. Although the harmful effect of microplastic of human body is still under investigation, there is concern that it may carry toxic chemicals additive to human body due to plastic material is usually manufactured with additives like stabilizer, flame retardant, and pigment. It is estimated that per 150 million tons of plastic in the ocean, 23 million tons which is additives. Besides, contaminants can be absorbed into the plastic. This additive and the contaminants would be released when the plastic is intaken. It is concerned that it will imbalance the equilibrium of the ecosystem and thus endanger the population of different species, impact the biodiversity. United Nations Environment Programme has a long and called for global attention to handle this issue before any irreversible danger to our world. Economic Outlook reported that the textile industry consumes an estimate of 74 million tons of synthetic polymer, such as polyester, acrylic, nylon, and polypropylene, and an addition of 7 million tons of synthetic nonwoven. Alan McKessie reported around 0.5 million tons of microplastic were released from the textile industry. our research team take microplastic as one of the key topics under research theme sustainability. We look closely with industry, apply advanced technology to ease a global pollution concern by tackling one of the main pollution source of microplastic pollution, then put the global ecosystem in danger. First, we would identify the source of microplastic in textile production stages. So far, most studies on microplastic and the textiles are focused on garment and the garment laundry. Yet, little has concerned on the origin, the fiber, yarn, fabric, and the garment manufacture process. We know in the production process, raw material handling, fiber and yarn spinning, fabrications such as knitting and woven, wet process such as dyeing and finishing, and the garment mapping could release the microplastic due to the mechanical force and the chemical stress. But so far, little comprehensive study has been done. In 2019, we developed a research project aimed to study the microplastic fiber released during the production process. In the project, we targeted polyester and the recycled polyester material, collecting samples from industry sites, covers yarn spinnings, fabrication, wet process, garment making, and wastewater treatment. Analyze the air dust, sludges, and the wastewater samples. Through this first-hand data, understanding the situation of release of microplastic from the manufacture process, we set up an expertise panel, including expertise from academia and industry, who will review the data, analyze the factor influence the microplastic release, then develop a protocol to manage microplastic release, covering infrastructure of wastewater delivery system, machines involved in key process, production tab, and even operation procedure. Hope through this project's outcome, manage and minimize the microplastic release from the production process. The pandemic closed the board, limited our research activities due to the traveling restrictions. We are now working with our industry partner closely, discussion online and training and to develop the sample collection protocols. And the good news is that the first round of data is on the way to our lab now. Except that the microplastic from textile industry, it is estimated that more than 300 million tons of plastic are produced annually, of which 50% are single-use items. At least 8 million tons will finally go to the ocean. Significant amount of studies has been conducted to find out high abundance of microplastic pollution, which will be observed close group. United Nations Environment Program has estimated that there is around 51 trillion microplastic particles in the ocean, and 80% of litters in the ocean are made of plastic. And each year it would cost at least $8 billion in economic loss due to damage in the marine ecosystem. The amount of microplastic is expected to keep increasing. In the Pacific Ocean subtropical convergence zone, it will estimate the weight of microplastic will be double by 2030 and 4 times by 2060. In 2021, we kicked off another project aimed to develop a complete solution, not only separate microplastic from wastewater, but also aggregate the filter microplastic from cluster in a microscope scale to provide convenience to further handle them. There are no existing methods to separate microplastic. There are some methods to separate the microplastic from the water system, like a reverse osmosis filter. However, the volume of wastewater to process is too larger to handle by this method, and thus the process rate is too slow to satisfy the daily need. Besides, there is concern that improper method to replace and handling the consumed filth will result in putting the microplastic back to ocean. In our project, we focus on developing a microplastic filter machine that is targeted to continuously collect the microplastic from wastewater. The machine is also expected to aggregate the microplastic to form a bigger piece, the micro scale, for convenience to further treatment. We apply the technology called acoustic manipulation technique. So this technique actually is well developed, applied in the biological and the life science. Acoustic manipulation technology is found to be very effective compared with other existing technology. We expect that the system can further contribute to serving as a base for further application study in developing similar tech machine for handling the microplastic from other industry and even in the marine system. Our preliminary results so far is very optimistic. Very low energy consumption and very effective. We are now exploring the scale up by the system design. So as a responsible consumer, manufacturer, brand, and the industry, the topic of microplastic and the textile need to be taken care of in every step of garment production and the use. From our INS side, a deep understanding of the microplastic source, behavior, management tool, and the separation and the collection method would help us contribute to control the microplastic release, reduce the impact to the environment. Finally, I would like to thank ITF, HM Foundation, and HMFIs and the UCP support all these research projects. And thanks very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gloria, for introducing and sharing everything that you all have done over these past years. I appreciate it. There were two key words that I took from your talk. You mentioned about the interaction of chemicals and additives with plastic raw material. And you use interesting keywords of scaling up. Yeah. So that's a great headway to the next talk. We heard from university on research with regards to detecting microplastic in the environment. We heard from HK Rita on how they are applying research and looking at implications for textile design and mitigation actions in production. But now, how about scaling it up from the 2 factories that HK Rita has been looking at to maybe 20 factories all over Asia? For that, I have the pleasure to invite Mr. Gundolf Klein. He leads the environmental component of the fabric project of GIZ, which looks at addressing the social and environmental impact within the textile industry in Asia. So Gundolf, it's over to you. Based on what you've seen, based on your work in Pakistan before, in Bangladesh, and also currently in Germany, you have this unique connection and relationship both with the producing countries, but also with the brands and retailers in Europe. If you could please introduce what Fabric Project is looking at and why the topic of microplastic is relevant, and how the Fabric Project is supporting scaling up some of the research. So over to you, Gundolf.
Thank you very much, Rakesh. And yeah, thank you very much as well for the introduction. I hope my screen is visible. I prepared a few slides and I'm very pleased to be invited to that webinar. First, I would like to introduce briefly the Fabric program you mentioned already and what we are going to do. What is the scope of the project? It's a regional project being implemented in several countries with the goal, the objective, fields of work to support the textile and garment industry in Asia in transformation towards a socially, economically, and ecologically sustainable production. For that, we support regional dialogue and having a knowledge transfer from one country to another one, and also the learning from each other as one of our main goals. For that, we cooperate as well with the private sector and to improve social and labor standards, promote gender equality at the workplace, and also finding solutions and scale it up on resource efficiency and environmental management. That's a big overall the scope of the project. With the project being implemented is the countries are Pakistan, from west to east, Pakistan, Bangladesh. We still are in Myanmar, Cambodia, Vietnam, and we work together with Chinese stakeholders in the region. And the role of Fabric here is to bring and together existing knowledge and distribute it as well in the region, among the countries, knowledge about sustainable business practices across the region. So that somehow we take over kind of a think tank function to identify good practices, for example, from Pakistan, scale it up, prepare it in a way that it can be used in facilities in the textile industry in Bangladesh or Vietnam, also the other way around. The logic behind the regional project and why we have it is that all the countries are facing a competitive pressure. Yeah, we know as it calls, the bottom to the race. The pricing is always a big issue for brands, also for where they are sourcing, etc. So the underbidding of each other among the countries, which relate at the end in the extreme, there of course that there is no application of any standards. We know that the situation, of course, is getting better and better. There are also regulation, more clear standards will be followed up and implemented. We have the requirements also from the buyer side, from the brands, and also the awareness on the producer side, then about the need and also about the benefits of being more sustainable. Nevertheless, what we need to consider here is, that's what I said, that all countries benefit from the increased competitive of the Asian garment sector. Of course, they are extremely sad if there's no competition, then there's also no innovation. But what we need to do, and that's also why there's set it up this regional project to coordinate joint minimum standards, cooperate, and the knowledge sharing I said already, and to use a bit the competitive pressure of a starting point and bring that together. With focus on environment, the Fabric program focuses on or considers this 4 areas more or less: the chemical management to support capacity building on site, water usage and wastewater. Here it's also focusing on the resource efficiency of water resources, reduction, reuse, recycle, and also to improve end-of-pipe solutions. And that is very much related as well to the topic overall of today's webinar when it comes to the microplastic. Another important point is energy transformation and waste. Microplastic can also be considered somehow as waste, but of course that's not the main point. So the question is a bit, why care about microplastics? We heard already from today, from previous presentation, that microplastic is an issue. But when it comes to the textile industry, I found this quote that synthetic clothes are polluting the earth. So the question is, okay, why? Synthetic clothes polluting the earth because of the loss of fibers, because of the loss of microplastic. We are getting released into the water bodies and normally from washing, during the washing, in home laundry, etc., but also in the industry. So overall, microplastics appeared in personal and care products already 50 years or more, longer time ago. Nowadays come from variety of sources, including larger plastic, which degrades into smaller and smaller pieces. That is a situation we all know about. Also, here are a number of how many millions of tons every year getting into the ocean as waste, which at the end also are found in our food chain. Fish contains microplastic, seafood, chicken, tap water, also bottled water, salt, even in beer is already microplastic being found. And for textile, it's very much important, as so far the sampling of microplastic finds that fibers are the second most identified shape of microplastic. And here at the idea, what can we do? And that is a strong relation also to our project as the fabric project. As I said, we support the knowledge sharing, and also we support initiatives and innovation to foster the transitional change of the sector, with a focus on the reduction of harm to the environment, improving labor and living conditions. And we see here now microplastic as one of the potential topics. Of course, there's a need to understand better about where it's getting released. Is it only the home laundry, or how much is the potential of the loss of microplastics already during the textile, during the wet processing steps, the finishing and the dyeing and the washing we see always. And there's a loss of microplastic, definitely, but so far the measures have taken place, as Frank said, mostly in the ocean, to see, okay, what is really relates into the ocean or in other water bodies. And to understand the amount of fibers lost from processing units, that can help to adjust the treatment process of wastewater. For example, better filtering. Here's an example, which is a filter, of course, not for microplastic, but even doesn't work really for bigger fibers. Also to maybe improve the finishing process, to reduce the reduction, if there's any possibility, but also to design already the fabrics that prevent the loss of fibers, of microfibers into the water bodies. And here is the potential we see. What can we do? And that brings us together again to one of our activity, the Regional Universities Network. We shortly call it RUN. And this network has the goal to facilitate networking among universities in the countries participating of fabric. That are some countries mentioned there. Most of, except Myanmar, from all the countries, we have members in this network to bring universities and stakeholders together on common interest in environmental, technical related topics, and to work on research of curricular and education, but also in research project. So from our side, we are facilitating the network, and the regular exchange, logistics for the knowledge sharing, the research and dissemination. And here it comes to what Frank has presented. The smart fish, which could be one of the activities, and we're looking for from the fabric side if this would be something to scale up on the regional level, and to making use of such kind of monitoring system to understand better really what is the impact of the textile and finishing industry on the loss of microfibers into the water bodies. That is the scope of the university network. I said already, the curricular gradation, knowledge and technological advancement are shared. Coordinated research and development development is promoted. Goals overall of our cooperation here is also with the private sector, and I included that here as we have also here participants from the private sector, and I think it's also very much important to involve not only the academic sector, also the private sector needs to be involved. Also for you as a brand, it would be helpful to understand better your impact during your production to the environment, and therefore we always look for cooperation with the private sector, responding to the growing demands for sustainability from consumer markets and risk management. And here then it comes to reduction of risk management, etc. I guess that the presentation will be also shared with you later, so that's why I won't get more into this slide here. I just wanted to briefly outline what we're doing and why microplastic might be of interest as well, or is of interest definitely from our perspective from the regional project, to bring several approaches together and to identify the common needs, and even more to identify the common interest and potentials. Thank you very much. I don't know if there's any questions. I would be happy to answer to that.
Right.
So maybe otherwise later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gundol. Thank you also for emphasizing this potential of how private sector together with academia could be amplifying the impact of changes that are required to reduce the negative impacts. Yeah, and thank you also for sharing how the German government via GIZ is investing into this initiative in Asia. So, having heard so far, we heard, of course, from the German Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong about how 1/3 of its members are involved in sourcing. They're based here in Hong Kong and taking care of sourcing operations, I guess, all over Asia. We heard also from the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology about the research taking place in Hong Kong, which is, of course, a member of the regional university network that Gundolf mentioned. We then heard from HK Rita, which is working together with industry on developing innovative ideas to mitigate and reduce the negative impact. Yeah? And now it's important to understand how all of this is connected together. We are in the beautiful offices of Invest Hong Kong, which is part of the Hong Kong government. We have with us Miss Emily Choi. She's a manager. She's a manager with the consumer products sector. And one of her mandates is attracting international companies and setting up in Hong Kong and expanding, but also connecting them and weaving this fabric of the ecosystem that exists. Previously, she was working with HSBC and also with the Hong Kong Trade and Development Council. So, Emily, please enlighten us about what's happening in Hong Kong and how are you able to attract all of these minds to Hong Kong?
So thank you, Rakesh. And good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So greetings from Hong Kong. We are in a very sunny city. Weather is getting great and people are like thirsting to go outdoors. So today is an honor for us to be able to invite so many insightful minds from Hong Kong Rita, from UST, also from Gundolf to come and share with us, and also UST, to share about the textile microplastic. So let's take a broader look at the textile industry or even sourcing industry in general. We do see that the whole industry is accelerating in terms of sustainability. So what's next for the sourcing sustainability as the sourcing industry in terms of sustainability? What should they do to accelerate or also to meet with consumers' expectations? We do see that consumers' expectations about sustainability is rising, especially with COP26. We do see a number of Gen Z consumers asking for governments and companies and individuals to take more actions. So what about the sourcing industry? We do think that Hong Kong can be a very vital role in driving the whole sourcing industry to become more sustainable. But before we go into why, let's take a look at the Hong Kong sourcing industry in general. Next slide, please. So Hong Kong, many people think about Hong Kong, they may think about Hong Kong as a financial hub, that with all these skyscrapers and all these people and finances. But in fact, the import, export, and trade is very much in Hong Kong's blood. So if you, for example, if you bump into like 12 guys who are working in Hong Kong, one of them would be working in import, export, and trade. And that hasn't included the logistics guys. And in fact, we have over 300,000 people working in the import, export, and trade profession. And that's even more than the people working in the finance and insurance industries altogether. So that's a lot of people and a lot of brains in Hong Kong where you can pick in terms of sustainability, for example, such as material innovation, such as digital as transformation, and definitely a lot of minds who are working very hard day by day and night by night, because Hong Kong people are known to be workaholic in improving the whole sustainability ecosystem in terms of sourcing. And in terms of companies in Hong Kong, we have nearly 30% of establishments that means companies with operations who are in the import, export, and trade industry. So these companies include the big ones, such as sourcing offices by multinational companies, that also include trading companies or even trading agents. And these guys working also very hard to help make sure to get all these things running. So that is very much in Hong Kong's blood. And even though last year, like we had the COVID, and as people are still, although travel is very much still restricted, we do see the sourcing industry is very thriving in Hong Kong. Here you can see two photos of the trade shows in Hong Kong. One in 2020, which is last year when everybody was talking about COVID. And this year, as things are becoming back to normal in Hong Kong, you both pictures, you do see people crowding and flocking to the Hong Kong Trade Development Council's trade fairs, looking for new suppliers, new ideas, and also new ways of doing business in this new sourcing landscape. So how has the sourcing changed? We have talked so much about how the sourcing changed, and the media have talked about the change in sourcing since last year. Basically, everybody has been talking about supply chain disruptions, the need for digitalization. And in fact, we did a report with KPMG with a number of industry professionals looking at the future of sourcing in Hong Kong and Asia and also beyond, looking at their views on how this sourcing landscape is changing and will change. And in fact, a lot of these changes are driven by changes in consumer behavior. We do see the acceleration of e-commerce, which demands companies to be more agile, faster in decision-making, and also supply chain management. We do see that companies having to embrace the digitalization so that people across different offices and also business partners in different countries and regions will be able to collaborate together at the same time. We also see that companies will need to become more agile, more creative, and also to address the needs for sustainability by the consumers as consumers think about what's next for human being in general. So, and definitely we do see that companies do need to become more agile, more digital, and of course they need a lot of talent to support their digital transformation. And here we do see that Hong Kong is very important, is in the driving seat for driving the whole industry to become better for everyone. Next slide, please. So in the report, we did a number of interviews with a number of industry professionals, and we asked them what's their view about Hong Kong, given the whole change and whole acceleration, basically transformation of supply chain sourcing. Basically, they think that there's not going to be another Hong Kong in this digital era. And they think that Hong Kong is very well positioned in driving all these digitalization and also helping companies to ride all these tides. When we ask them why, so a lot of them tell us about the sourcing talents that are in Hong Kong, given so many people in Hong Kong are working in trade, import and export and social sourcing. We also hear from them that the Hong Kong's clustering effect with other cities in the Greater Bay Area, that is in 9 cities in mainland plus Hong Kong plus Macau, would create a lot of synergy effects in terms of innovation, and also it is also very well positioned as a consumer market in its own right. Also, in Hong Kong is also accelerating in terms of innovation, government support in terms of research and development, and ESG is also a getting more and more important topic in Hong Kong, as the listed companies in Hong Kong are required to disclose their performances in ESG. It includes environmental, social, and governance performances. And also new technologies are also allowing businesses to collaborate in the hybrid mode. And that's why it enables Hong Kong, even though Hong Kong is known to be a small city with a very, very small manufacturing sector, Hong Kong is still a very good, is very well positioned to manage your sourcing operations in Asia and beyond. Next slide, please. So talking about the innovation in Hong Kong, so we heard about the UST, we also heard about Hong Kong Vita, about their works, the fantastic works in terms of innovation. So we want to, that's one thing that we want to bring is that Hong Kong government very much encourages research and development. Here you can see a slide, a website capture from H&M Foundation. You also see a screen capture from Eco Textiles. So the one interesting thing is that about the H&M Foundation's partnership with Hong Kong Vita. So here I've highlighted two amounts. So one in this Planet First partnerships, both Hong Kong Vita and H&M Foundation join hands together to look for sustainable ways to in this textile industry. And for H&M Foundation, they paid US $12 million. And of course, the Hong Kong government has supported tremendously in this project. So the whole research research amount is actually $100 million US. But definitely, this is very much important, very high on Hong Kong government's agenda. And that's why the Hong Kong government is very willing to support projects that are related to research and development and also material innovation. Another thing that's driving the whole innovation landscape in Hong Kong are the startups. And the Hong Kong government does a survey of the startups, the number of startups in Hong Kong. We do see the number of startups in Hong Kong has been growing, even though last year we had the COVID. This year we're still living in the COVID, hasn't really gone away. But still, we see that the number of startups continues to grow tremendously. And when we look at the industries, we do see that a number of them being in the supply chain and also in sustainable technology sectors. So these companies are driving a lot in terms of sustainability and also new materials. Next slide, please. So one of the very important players in the whole sustainability and also the whole sourcing ecosystem is the mills. The mills is a incubator plus funding plus a fund by Nanfeng Group, which used to run the largest mill in Hong Kong. So they run an incubator and also working with a number of startups in new materials, in also digitalized production, digital supply chain management, and also new ways of doing sourcing and also managing your supply chain. So here you can see a number of startups logos, and in fact, there are more. Next slide, please. So here you see more and more companies joining, and actually more and more companies joining them, providing new ideas and also new materials or new ways of doing businesses in the whole sourcing landscape. So apart from them, we also see some other companies which are not startups, but they are also working very hard in terms of sustainability. So when we think about sustainability or even ESG, it doesn't only include E, but also the G part. So this is one example by Elevate Plus Phone Group. They developed an app for workers' management where workers can provide feedback about their working conditions and also their thoughts to the management. There are also tips from the management or the app to the workers about reminders such as COVID tips. Next slide, please. And in fact, the whole sourcing community in Hong Kong is very much committed to sustainability. We just had an event on Rethink 2021, where we had a whole conference on sustainable resources, supported by Sustainable Apparel Coalition. Here, in the event, we do see a number. Here is one of the events in the track, and here you can see a few guys speaking. One is from Hong Kong Nonwoven, a Hong Kong company, third generation, which has been very committed in new materials. And also we see that there's a person from Higgs company which are developing their own Higgs index. We also have TAL Apparel, which are a local company, very much prominent in terms of apparel manufacturing and also sustainable apparel collection. Apart from that, we also have Redress, which is an NGO very much focusing on the environmental footprint, which are working with the industry on reducing waste. So I think in the interest of time, I think we may skip the video. So, but they do have a very interesting, they mix digital plus sustainability together in organizing a digital fashion festival. So, and we do have a number of companies who are still very much committed to Hong Kong. So this is one of the interview of KW, which was done last year by another company by Fiducia. They are still, although they opened an office in mainland China, they still open an office in Hong Kong, and they think that Hong Kong talent is something that cannot be replaced. So we do hope that, given so many of you are from different parts of the world, we do hope that you would consider having some kind of operations in Hong Kong. And we are very happy to discuss with you on your next steps, whether you are thinking about expanding your businesses or developing new materials or doing research and development. We are very happy to help. We can show next slide on the practical experience assistance by Invest Hong Kong. So lots of words, but no worries, just contact us and we will be happy to discuss. And so next year, you can find my contact details and also my LinkedIn. If you want to get in touch with us or get a copy of the report, or you just have certain kinds of ideas about sourcing or even like managing your supply chain, do talk to us and we are happy to help. So luckily I'm on time, so I'll pass the time to Rakesh.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you for taking us through that journey and also showcasing how Hong Kong government has been supporting via the Innovation Fund. I know our MD, Mr. Martin Fan, also appreciates this and also appreciates how Invest Hong Kong is bringing together all of these stakeholders in Hong Kong. Very useful was the example you showcased on how you have been supporting Rethink, but also at the same time supporting FinTech Week and the synergy of digital sourcing, green things. So thank you for all of that. Now, having heard from all the experts today, let's have a look at what's happening. Can you go a few slides back? Okay, so in addition to what you heard today, there's a lot of ongoing research. So for example, there's this research which is already concluded and the report will be out soon, MinShed, which is going to also look at the topic of microplastic. There's Euratex along with many stakeholders in Europe, which has come out with this cross-industry agreement with regards to measuring microplastic shedding and having a standard, which will be out together with SENS and LEC, the standardization bodies in Europe. There's also an interesting part which you touched upon, Dr. Gloria, with regards to harmful chemical additives. Yeah? So there's the JEF project going on, which, while looking at chemicals, persistent organic pollutants, is also looking at microplastic. And of course, with regards to standardizing the mechanism for measuring microplastic. So that's what the EU JRC is working on. Our colleague Bernd Fritsche in Hong Kong and our team in Germany is also working on it. So essentially, it's useful, of course, to look at this full life cycle impact when we are looking at material choices, design choices, production process choices, and how it would have an impact. So as we go into Q&A, I think it's useful to get your feedback based on what you've heard. So Ryan, if you could please pull up the poll for our audience. So having heard everything that you have today, what do you feel should be the next step? Should it be, for example, that the industry, first of all, should develop a database so that we map out all of these research activities that are taking place all over the world? Yeah. Should any and all research results be made open source? Yeah. Should we also look at how potentially companies who are not yet involved, whether these are factories, whether these are brands, whether these are investors, get a chance to participate, to volunteer by sharing some fabric samples, by opening up your factories? Or should we also consider perhaps that certain participants or stakeholders who are not part of ongoing activities be able to financially contribute and participate? So as the results keep coming in, I think, Ryan, let's have it displayed on screen. And I think that's a good headway to also get some feedback from our experts here. So, oh, by the way, we are allowed to go mask-free because we are vaccinated and we are 4. So, all right. So, Gundolf, I'm curious about one part, one for you, Gundolf, and also for you, Dr. Gloria. A quarter of the participants say that all research results should be made open source. What do you feel, Dr. Gloria?
Actually, Hong Kong Retail is supported by Hong Kong government. We definitely spread our research outcome, our knowledge to the industry, to the public is our duty.
Okay.
Yes, and we have a business development team and a marketing team. They working on this to introduce our technology to the industry, to the public.
Yeah.
Definitely, please. If you any interesting topic, feel free to come to us.
Okay. And Gundolf, from your perspective, once you, as part of Fabric project, if you deploy some of these initiatives, the outcome, the results that will be there, do you see the possibility that these are made open source?
Yes, that's a simple answer from my side. If there's public money involved, the data have to be published, the outcomes, definitely. So, and even more if we need such kind of data also to foster the innovation, and doesn't make sense really to going only on a small scale forward on that. We need a big approach, and therefore as much data we can open, it's even better.
Okay. All right. And then we also see that about 66% of you mentioned, wow, so many initiatives, so much research going on. Can somebody or a group of somebodies develop a database and map all of this together? What's going on in Europe, what's happening in Australia, what's happening in Hong Kong, what's happening via Fabric, and mapping it all together? I think I wouldn't pose this question to you, but that's what the audience is hoping for, yeah? Simple database which maps all these activities. And also an aspect which maybe you might be able to answer is bringing together plastic producers and converters into this discussion. Perhaps some of the intrinsic properties are decided at the additive phase when they are converted and so on before they are spun into yarn. Do you feel that thing, or do you feel that it's not so relevant to bring in the converters and the raw plastic pellet manufacturers into the discussion?
I think we involve more parties will be benefit to all of us.
Okay.
Actually, different background, different knowledge background, I think actually will stimulate all of us to find more solutions. That's a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then to you, Cindy, audience is also hoping that there is more collaboration between the global research institutions like yourself, let's say, is it already taking place with other universities in different parts of the world, perhaps via RUN or Fabric? Yes.
Yes. For RUN, yes, but we are welcome to work with other partners, not particularly in Hong Kong, but we welcome anywhere outside Hong Kong as well.
Yeah. Okay. Gundolf, from your perspective, what is your vision with regards to smart fish, with regards to the correlation between what's detected in the ETP, in the effluent treatment plants, and what's coming out of garments fabric? What are you exploring?
Yeah, we have established a RUN network. I think here's a very huge potential, and also some of the members have shown their interest that we could make use of this network really to scale up the research on this. For example, like bringing the smart fish from one country to another one to detect how many microplastic getting lost during the textile finishing processes. And with such good database, it would be better really to estimate a total, even more maybe the global volume of loss of microplastic, and to really have a better understanding, as I said, and try to point it out in the presentation also, such kind of data would be a first step to find answers to where we really need to adjust the production or either the garments themselves. Yeah, for example, producing garments which prevent the loss of microfibers during the finishing and also then the washing at home. And so far, there are data available by analyzing the loss of microplastic in home washing. Yeah, at home, how much plastic is getting lost. But the first washing starts in the production itself, and that's where we need to start really to identify what is in need and what can we do to avoid such kind of environmental pollution.
Right. And looking at the kind of effort that is required to fine-tune these research activities. Emily, from your perspective, I mean, on one hand, we have the development agency GIZ from Germany who might put in funds into this research. Do you feel that there is still appetite within the Innovation Development Fund of Hong Kong government to further support this ongoing research together with industry?
The Hong Kong government very much encourages research and development by such as Hong Kong Retail, and also, of course, if for companies which want to do research and development themselves, Hong Kong government is also very much supportive. And so definitely, like for projects which can definitely to get the innovate ITF, there needs to be some procedures involved. But as long as the research and development project fulfills the ITF criteria, definitely the Hong Kong government is very happy to support.
Right. Also, thank you for supporting third-party testing certification companies like ourselves. Martin, we might also want to look further into ITF, yeah?
Yeah.
All right. As we head towards the end, I have a question for both you, Dr. Gloria and Cindy. During your research, when was this eureka moment when your team felt, we might have found something, we can go ahead and find answers?
Yes. Actually, that is the most exciting moment. And I think most of the researchers really enjoy that moment. Agreed. Yeah, it's come from very fine and a small point. And actually, you got through that problems or some new findings, you can change all the research roadmap and some new stuff coming. So just very enjoyable. Yeah, that's, I think it's all general course. Yeah, I agree with you. So I just like when we teach the students, and they have to have more observations and finding the problems and think out of the box, and then to incorporate how scientific principles to tackle the problems. This is this is how it works.
Okay. But for us, it was about 4 months back, where what we have today is actually a series of coincidences. We had research reports, we had some meetings, we had some talks, and we thought, maybe all of this can be linked together. You have, of course, heard from many of us here, but what's also gone on in the background is a great support from a team from Invest Hong Kong, Bess and her team, communications team from TÜV Rheinland. We have Simon, we have Ryan. We also have communications team and support staff from the German Chamber of Commerce who have all been supporting in order to make sure that this happens. And of course, all of you. But before we conclude, I think we've heard from industry representatives, the German Chamber, you heard from research institutes, institutes that apply research, you heard from development projects like from GIZ, and you heard a little bit from third-party testing and certification companies. I think it's important to hear now from Mr. Casey, who heads all the interaction with the chambers. So you're speaking to a much wider audience of industry. You are also having ears to what the Hong Kong government is saying, what the industry is saying, what the academia is saying. Yes. What are your reflections, Casey, and what would be your thoughts and hopes after this
Well, thank you very much, Rakesh. And thank you to all our speakers this afternoon for actually a very educational and informative session. Absolutely right. I think the conversation is as much part of our desire to do something beyond what is strictly within our business duties to our companies, our shareholders, and so on. We want to do better than that for the environment. COP26 is just concluded, or that just concluded, with a degree of success or failure, as whichever way you'd like to look at it. And I think it's important that we, as members of our society, do our part to contribute towards that that effort to make the environment in which we live and work a little bit better. We leave it a little bit better than how we found it. And everybody here today, I think, has contributed towards that. Both the universities, we heard from, I'll make sure I'm not leaving anybody out here, Frank and Cindy from UST. We've got Gloria, thank you, Gloria, from the R&D Center, one of the R&D centers in Hong Kong, from Gundolf, from GIZ, and of course, Tuf, you've done, Rakesh, you've done actually way beyond what a typical testing house would normally do, and bringing out these topics which are extremely topical and extremely relevant. I'm a firm believer in things being demand-driven. And I think as we start to educate the consumer about some of these issues, consumers will be crying out for better and higher standards for companies to live up to. And I think this is part of that whole process of, you talked about the Gen Z and the millennium generation. They are more aware, perhaps, and maybe a bit more vocal and militant. And I think that's a really, really good force to wake us up. We are kind of a bit blasé, perhaps. And it's good to have that sort of wake-up call and say, yeah, we should do better, and we can do better. I think maybe here I'd like to say a couple of words about Invest Hong Kong, because our work is, you mentioned just now, we are the eyes and ears for the government. We're right at the front line working with companies. Our work is primarily one of investment promotion, which is helping companies from overseas to come to Hong Kong to create physical establishments and thereby creating employment for Hong Kong people. It's what we call a foreign direct investment agency. And our work principally is purely the helping and information provision for people who are interested in that part. Hong Kong at the moment is a little bit quiet because of the closed borders, but we definitely are ready ourselves to take any inquiries that you may have about the business environment here in Hong Kong and how what opportunities are here available for your business. Our team here is organized into sector teams. Today we heard from Emily, which is one of our teams, and she's in consumer products. We have 8 other teams here. We have 31 offices around the world. So if you're listening from Europe, we have offices in Berlin, in London, in Brussels, and we have colleagues in Paris and Milan as well as the Nordics. So we are pretty well represented across the board. In the Middle East, we're in Dubai, newly set up team, and we're all over the North America and Asia as well, not to mention Latin America. My team is the consulate and chamber engagement. So you mentioned half of it, the chamber engagement part. I'm also responsible for engagement with consulates. And my role really is to go through the chambers. And today we are very, very lucky to have the support, the very, very warm support from the German chamber in organizing this webinar under their Green series. And it's something that we're extremely grateful for. This engagement is ongoing. We are actually spreading the learning that we find from the chamber, and I think that's a really, really important part of our role. Is as a platform we bring people together for sharing, and the sharing is a really, really key part. There's no point in reinventing things that other people have found before. So in closing, thank you all for joining wherever you may be. I believe we'll be sharing the presentation slides. Please make sure you put your emails, your name, company name, and email in the chat box. We will send presentations to you if you do that. And we are extremely grateful for your time. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you.